Good afternoon and welcome to LMR Live from the University of Mississippi. LMR Live, where learning is fun and we provide you edutainment. We give you the opportunity to interact with acclaimed artists in real time. There's a great energy here today, right? Why? And why? Because this room is filled with Music 100 students who are so excited to be here, right? Right? Yeah, whoop whoop! Also exciting because we have our viewers via the web. Special shout out to Auburn University, folks there that are tuning in with us. So, whether you are here with us via the World Wide Web or in person, we want to hear from you. So feel free to chat in the YouTube feature. Feel free to raise your hand in the house if you have a question. We want to hear from you. What do I always say? The music research revolution continues. Today's LMR Live is happening in partnership with the University of Mississippi Center for the Study of Southern Culture, and because of two amazing people who work there. I want to specifically thank right off the bat Director Katie McKee and Associate Director of Programs Afton Thomas. Today is also possible because of the support from Jazz Road, a charitable foundation with additional support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. So, are you ready for edutainment? So, let's meet our first guest, our guru of Skrontch, Byron Asher. Byron is a clarinetist, saxophonist, composer, improviser based in New Orleans, raised in Maryland. He has performed across Europe and the US. He's played shows in festivals in Germany, Poland, Slovakia, and the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. As a composer, his work has been supported by many foundations, including the Foundation for Contemporary Arts in New York City. Byron holds a Master of Music and Jazz Studies from the University of New Orleans and can be seen regularly performing there. He leads his own award-winning Skrontch Music Large Ensemble, which we're going to enjoy this evening. So, help me give a warm welcome to Byron. Welcome! Have a seat.
All right.
So, literally we met, what, 2 minutes ago?
2 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago. So we have corresponded, via email and text and whatnot, but I feel like I've known you.
It's amazing what digital communication can do these days.
We were joking in case the timing didn't work out that we were going to have a student jump in and pretend to be you.
Oh, cool.
we'll just go with it. No. But welcome. So glad you're here.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So, what was the first musical instrument you were gravitated towards, or you studied first? What brought Byron to music?
Okay, so the first musical experiences I ever had were singing in a church choir as a 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I did that for a few years. I did take piano lessons very early, second grade. When I was in 4th grade, I picked up the clarinet, and I actually really was not interested in the clarinet as an instrument initially.
Now, was this through the school system?
It was through the school system. So in Maryland, where I grew up, you started band in 4th grade, age 10, and I really wanted to be a saxophone player. And the band director at my school was a clarinetist, and he had a rule that you couldn't play the saxophone until you had played the clarinet for 6 months. And so I was forced to play the clarinet, and I didn't want to.
And then we're forced to do something, right?
Right. Well, I wanted to move as quickly as possible to the saxophone, but then I kind of ended up getting stuck on it. Picked up the saxophone later when I was in middle school, but the clarinet was, I suppose it was an odd bedfellow for a second until I kind of really fell in love with it.
That's neat. So our music educators out there, as you're steering young people towards their instrument selection and process, it can have long-lasting impact and whatnot.
Yeah.
So let's jump ahead. You decide to pursue music. What led to that decision, and what type of music to embrace and whatnot?
Yeah, so you know, the school programs that I was involved with through high school were generally very strong, but I wasn't actually ever really intending to pursue music much past high school.
Okay.
And in fact, when I did my undergraduate degree in religious studies and really hardly played throughout the entire 4 years, I did that. And then after I finished undergrad, I came back to it and realized how much I missed it and how much I enjoyed it. And I've always been a performer, and I had done a lot of theater and was moving away from theater, but wanted to have a performing outlet, and came back to music and fell in love with it. And I joined some bands that were mediocre, and then I made a decision that I should really take it seriously, and that's what led me to New Orleans.
Wow. So the journey to New Orleans was, can you be more specific within that? Was it, how did you choose New Orleans?
Well, okay, so I had a friend in undergrad who was from New Orleans, and he was a record collector, and we would sit around and listen to New Orleans records. And we would listen to records that I knew that I didn't know were New Orleans records from like early on, and it sort of started to piece together this world. And then I went to visit him and was really taken by the music community that I saw, and was actively searching for a sort of professional music community to join, and was interested in a community that felt like a real community rather
Right.
than a sort of cutthroat setting where I felt like I could have space to really grow and like move in different directions and really explore finding my own voice. And I feel like New Orleans is a really special place for that. There's a lot of possibility for that in New Orleans.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. So the birth of Skrontch, how did that happen? And even before we go there, so many people want to know how the name Skrontch. Now I read, but I want to hear you describe. How'd you come up with the name, and what birthed Skrontch?
Sure. Okay, so the name first it's named after a dance step. It was a dance craze in the 30s. I guess it was a sort of it wasn't a top tier craze. It wasn't like a Lindy Hop, but it was a lower level craze, and it was something. So the Duke Ellington Orchestra had a residency in Harlem at the Cotton Club in the late 20s and the 30s, and there was a floor show that happened. So the band would play and there would be dancers, and this was one of the dance steps that was featured in the floor show. Do
you know how to do this dance step?
I don't. I've never seen a video of it. I've read descriptions of what the dance step is. There's an emphasis on beat 4 of the measure. That apparently the dancer moves through the measure, beat 4, looks backwards, and then moves forwards into the next measure. So, I came across this. I learned, reading about this dance step. There's a song that Duke had written to accompany the dance step that there's a handful of recordings out there of. Never really became that famous, and I felt like there was a really nice metaphor for what I was trying to do musically by looking backwards, but thinking about it in a forward-thinking way.
Yeah.
But then also the sort of onomatopoeic nature of the word being so like consonant heavy and angular. Yeah, I felt like that really like encapsulated some of the aesthetic choices we were making.
Got it.
In terms of embracing some atonality and some avant-garde techniques, as well as some more mainstream
So in the
jazz
Skrontch
techniques.
Music project, there's a
Yeah.
lot of improv that comes into play.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So, the genesis of the project then was trying to, as a clarinetist, I was, at the time, I started really working on the project in 2016, started doing a bunch of research into the clarinet tradition. I was playing a lot of traditional jazz in New Orleans at the time, like music of New Orleans traditional jazz, and I was really trying to understand what the who the people were, right? I was listening to the recordings and I was checking out the solos, but I really wanted to like get a little bit deeper into the people and the historical context. And through that, sort of started piecing together a larger picture of the formation of jazz in a political context, in a anti-Jim Crow political context, and really started thinking about jazz as part of a larger Black American musical cultural production that was at the time in opposition to racist, oppressive political ideologies that were happening. And so that's sort of some historical and theoretical underpinnings of the project. To your question about improvisation, you know, one of the things, so it's essentially a jazz project, and jazz is improvisation is a central tenet of jazz, right? And one of the things that I've always found so fascinating about New Orleans jazz in particular is there's what's called a New Orleans polyphony. It's a collective improvisation. And you know, as we move further forward in the 20th century history of jazz music, there's the big band era and bebop and post-bop. There's a lot of individual virtuosity, and that's beautiful and it's amazing. But there was something really unique that happened in New Orleans when the music was forming that was about a collective sound. And I think it's mirrored in some ways that I really find beautiful in free jazz and more avant-garde leaning jazz, where there's a lot of collective improvising, and it doesn't sound at all like the New Orleans tradition of collective improvising, but there's some through lines there.
Interesting. And
so to your question about improvisation, it's the piece, the suite that was the beginning, that was the first thing that I wrote for the project, is generally through composed, but there's instances of a lot of collective improvisation, which which I think at once references the sort of progressive avant-garde jazz of the 60s through today, and also the New Orleans.
So again, this idea of like the past, but then how it's propelling forward and showing these parallels or similarities. Very neat.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
I want to experience a little bit of in the audience, and we have viewers that don't know a lot about jazz. Okay,
sure.
Not in this room. Let me be clear, but watching. Can I pull some folks up and we do a little maybe improv exercise?
Sure, let's try it.
Let's try it. Let's just see what happens.
Let's see if
we're going
it
to call
works.
up Hugh, Jesse, and Ricky. Have you all come up, and we're going to try a little experimentation here. So,
Okay.
these three gentlemen are part of our Mississippians Jazz ensemble,
Cool.
and
Great.
they've been great sports to just jump on board. So, will you just play with them, have at it a bit.
Okay, all right. So we're talking about, I was just talking about collective improvisation. And one of the things that I think is really beautiful about New Orleans collective improvisation is that there are some really established roles, right? And this is great. We have saxophone and flugelhorn, but like trumpet and trombone. Those are, a woodwind instrument, clarinet or saxophone, trumpet, trombone. That's like the like traditional New Orleans front line. And there's some like very specific things that happen, right? The trumpet player plays the melody very simply. The woodwind player would articulate the harmony of the song in a sort of arpeggiated way. It's called obligato, and then the trombone player would accentuate different things. It's called tailgating. And I think that we're not going to try to emulate New Orleans improvisation right now, but what I think is interesting is that moving forward into sort of like collective free improvisation, there's a sort of a sense that when you're thinking about it, we just get on stage and we just kind of improvise and we just kind of go, right? And that's that can be really amazing, and it's really great if you're a very skilled improviser and you have relationships with people that you're playing with and you know where people are going to go. And there are many, many ensembles that do that, have done that throughout the 20th century and the 21st century with like amazing results. But if you aren't necessarily so privileged to have those relationships and those situations, one of the things that I think always really helps is to give yourself some roles, right? So in the New Orleans context, we have the trumpet, the trombone, and the clarinet, and those are some very defined roles. And so when we're making this collective palette, we kind of know where we're going, right? So it's not necessarily quite as clear in the sort of free improvisation context. So now this is not my own thinking. This is somewhat indebted to Pauline Oliveras' thinking about roles of roles for improvisation, roles for the improviser. If you know anything about her, a great composer and theorist and musician and improviser and deep listener. So this is related to that. It is not exactly that, but it sort of comes from that. Let's think about three roles, and each of you can have one, and then we'll kind of shift, right? So the first role that I want to think about is the role of the generator. So this is the musician who puts out the idea first, right? Comes up with the idea. It could be long tones. It could be playing some weird, crazy stuff. It could be just very simple melody. It could be something really beautiful, something very strange, right? So that's one role, the generator. And then there's a second role, and let's call that role the supporter. The second role, the supporter, is the person who hears what the generator is doing and says, if you know anything about improv comedy, says yes and to that, right? Says, okay, I hear that you're doing long tones. That's beautiful. I support that, and I'm going to make that. I'm gonna make that choice sound like a correct collective choice. And then the third role that I want to think about is, we could call it the interrupter, or we could call it, I want to call it actually counterpoint, right? So we understand what we mean by the word counterpoint, right? So like, there's the generator, there's the supporter who says yes and to the generator, and then the counterpoint person who says, I hear what you're doing, let me do something different but complementary. And in that way, these three roles can kind of work together to create a larger picture. Cool. So can we try those? Can we try that? Who wants to be generator? All right, so you're generator. What's your name? Quinchan?
Do you guys want to come over this way?
Quinchan's
Does you have enough
generator.
room?
Yeah, come
Spread
on
out.
up. Okay, so Quinchan's the generator, and you want to be the supporter? Okay, your name?
Yes.
Jesse's the supporter, and Riggy, so you're the counterpoint. Cool, so let's try
and I
it.
want to say again, they are great sports to jump in and try this. There's some bravery right here. I appreciate
Let's
it.
try it. Take it away. Any generation of anything. Okay, cool. Let me stop you right there. That's awesome. That sounds beautiful. Okay, let's switch roles, right? So, Jesse, why don't you be the generator, and you can be this Ricky supporter, and you're the counterpoint. Now, again, let's try to really stick to the roles. So really, if you're the supporter, really supporting the generator, and the generator is really like taking that idea to its furthest conclusion, and then the counterpoint is something totally different. Cool? Let's give, once the generator starts, let's give a little bit more time before the supporter comes in, and a little bit more time to let ideas settle. Yeah. All right.
I like how I don't know about those watching or here, the amount of listening that is going on as you're playing is so wonderful and profound. Do y'all see how much they are listening as playing? We all, I think, can learn from that as musicians, whatever, in any genre.
So I'm curious, how did that feel for y'all?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was trying to, not necessarily predict where he was going to go,
Uh-huh.
kind of feel his energy and just try to think of things that would go along with his piece.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
Should we move on? Or should
Let's
we try
move
one
on.
more?
That was awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Y'all
thank
sound
you.
great.
Thank you. We got some great students here, for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to bring up a friend of yours.
Great.
Can we
Do
bring
it.
up Reagan Mitchell?
Bring
And I
him
want
up.
to dive into this Skrontch music. Would everyone put their hands together and help me welcome Reagan Mitchell to the stage? Now, we've known each other a little bit longer. We've known each other for maybe 20-some minutes, but so I want to know, how did you get the personnel together for the project?
Well, so I was fortunate to have a artist residency at a great artist residency center in New Orleans called A Studio in the Woods, and that meant that I had a budget. So I wrote the music over the course of this 6-week artist residency, and then I had a budget, and that meant that I could hire my favorite musicians in the city.
Wow.
And so that's more or less what happened. You know, I called people whose voices I really loved on each individual instrument and whose energies I resonated with. And there's a lot of people that I had worked with a lot before, some people that I'd only worked with a little bit before.
So you two knew each other well before this, or?
Yeah, we knew each other, yeah.
Because we had, you know, we had realized sort of our kinship bond when Brad Webb put us together and we did that tour
Right.
up to Chicago.
Brad Webb is a dear friend of ours and a great drummer in New Orleans. And throughout the process of writing the music, I think it was the previous summer we had done this tour, and Reagan and I had a lot of phone conversations about the subject matter and what I was trying to deal with, and that were really actually incredibly helpful and sort of formative in sort of the generation of the framing of the piece. So, and then it was a no-brainer to ask Reagan to be involved, and there's 8 other fabulous musicians as well.
Which we get to experience this evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll
So you got to
see them all.
handpick to a certain degree, like
absolutely.
creating this fantastic energy and group of musicians that would bring this project to life.
Yeah, totally. And there was enough lead time that I was like, I knew that sometimes you get a situation where you get a really nice gig and people aren't available because people are busy in New Orleans, everyone's working. And in this situation, it's happened that there was enough lead time for me to like make the phone calls and for it to all come together. And I was, one of the really beautiful things about it is that I put the ensemble together as I was finishing the music, and I had written a lot of the melodies, but I hadn't done a lot of the orchestrations. So I was orchestrating with particular voices of
fabulous.
instrumentalists in mind, which like really I think worked out incredibly well.
So two things I want to make sure I address. One, I want to really clearly state what Skrontch music is to those, so to make sure they understand. So I'm going to read something you add to, but Skrontch music is the ambitious debut recording by award-winning New Orleans-based composer, clarinetist, saxophonist Byron Asher. It's a 5-movement, research-based suite for 10-piece ensemble, and this is what the important part, exploring the intertwined histories of New Orleans jazz and anti-Jim Crow activism during the early 20th century. We talked about this a little bit. I love a contemporary investigation into the early jazz tradition. Skrontch music highlights that the development of music was itself a form of resistance to the racist Jim Crow regime. I mean, I think it's what I want to resonate with each of you, and what I think is so beautiful from my humble perspective is, this is the perfect embodiment of how music can make a difference and is telling such an important story and draws people into a subject matter that sometimes people want to avoid or not address. And I want to thank you for that. That's beautiful, and I want you to realize the power that you have in which the projects you choose. Second, how cool to, especially for the students, to see idea, I have to get the money, then you have the budget, then I get to create the art, and then there's that business aspect of how do I then perpetuate that so I can share that with others. So I want to make sure you're getting that from this experience, that there's this, I don't know, activism, there's this community engagement, but also enjoying the fact of seeing artists thrive, right?
Sure, yeah, and then the other thing that I would add to that is that, you know, it's March of 2020, and this is the first tour that the project has ever done, and in large part due to a really wonderful new grant that now exists in the country for jazz artists to be touring. But I had the artist residency in fall of 2016, and I was thinking about forming some sort of musical thing out of research I had been doing starting in 2014. So this is a very long sort of, it's a long game.
Totally,
You know?
and I think that's also important to understand, because I think sometimes, especially, let's say a generalization, but younger folks used to things happening quickly, right, by today's standards, and it takes time. That's why when you are in the academic situation where you're being forced to do research, forced to play the clarinet, how can you make it your own? How can you perpetuate that? You know, what's your passion?
Right.
Yeah. What do you want to say about Skrontch music, Reagan?
Well,
What do we need to know?
One thing I'm always going to say, and I always make sure I shout you out, man. I think one thing that's really incredible about this music, and particularly the composer Byron, is really, I think there's something that's so powerful about a love of really big ideas that are so much bigger than us, right? And I think just even thinking about that one movement that we really talked through, right? Because I think at the same time you were working on this, I was trying to finish up my dissertation, and I was also really interested in thinking about sort of we were collectively kind of found this research point of being really interested in thinking very differently about spaces of knowledge, and particularly Black multidisciplinary spaces of knowledge, and really thinking about that in very ancient places in the United States, New Orleans being one of those places. So I think that there's something, just thinking about the music while you hear, it is so much more than the sound. It is very much this, it is this engenderment, and it's also this commitment to ideas that are so much bigger than all of us, right? I think if we can just talk about, I don't want to go through everything, but I think just even thinking about why, there's that one movement you have, man, where it's a multidisciplinary project, but particularly the Committee of Citizens piece, which is such an incredible composition for a number of reasons, right? The writing is really beautiful, but I think also thinking about what the Committee of Citizens are in New Orleans, right? Really understanding that as really one of these multi-generational, multi-ethnic, grassroots legal organizations that was based in Faubourg-Treme, right? And so it's really, so the thing about just thinking about sort of the spirit, and that the spirit that works through that, and I think that that's something that's really deep for us. That's the way the music touches us, and that's the way that we really try to play the music, right? It moves us in that way, right? Because it's really this, and I mean, it's not only Byron, but also just the group of people that, you put together are people that are very much committed to ideas so much bigger than all of us, right?
Right. I think something interesting you did, Byron, the photo shoot, was that in July 2019? Visiting various locations in New Orleans, Ward 7, correct?
Yeah, the 7th Ward. So, it
it was really just, it started as just like, oh, I need new photos for this record that's coming out. But then I started.
But he had a bigger idea.
But then I was like, oh, well, I mean, let's like think about, like, when I was writing the music, I was living in a little shotgun house in the 7th Ward, and I was discovering that all of these clarinetists that I loved had grown up in this one neighborhood, this very small neighborhood, and my partner gave me for my birthday one year this map that she had found in the University of New Orleans General Archive that was a jazz map of New Orleans made by some like German like amateur jazz historian, where he had gone and he had taken the map of New Orleans and marked where the homes of all of these famous musicians were they still standing, were they not, and then like where the music halls were that no longer were there, and all of this beautiful information that like you wouldn't necessarily find elsewhere. So I had this map, and I was like, well, I know that Sidney Bechet's house was right here, and I know that Omer Simeon, who played with Jelly Roll Morton, grew up in this house, and I know that Lorenzo Tio Jr., who was a clarinet teacher in New Orleans, taught most of the great clarinetists, had a house at this intersection that is now where the interstate is, you know. And so I thought it would be a really evocative thing, spiritually for myself, and also actually as like to tie it into the larger project, to go and have these essentially album promo photos taken in these locations. So we went to Sidney Bechet's, the location where Sidney Bechet's house was, and we went to where Omer Simeon's house was, and we went to Barney Bigard, who was Duke Ellington's clarinetist in the early days. We went to his house, and the process of doing the photo shoot actually was one of discovery as well, of like, oh, this house doesn't exist anymore. This address is here, but this house isn't here. Or, oh, this house, this would have been the house. House is here, and it is old enough that this would have been the house that this person
And you probably got to
grew
talk
up in.
to
And we talked to
a
a
lot
bunch
of people.
It was July. People were sitting on their porches, had a lot of really nice conversations. It was
The photos are
fascinating.
fantastic.
And
Would
they're
I be allowed to
beautiful
share
photos.
them after this?
Sure, yeah.
I would love to
Yeah.
share them with folks so they can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, totally.
It would be great. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for talking about this a bit. I hope that getting to know you a bit, hearing the story out of your mouths as opposed to just reading it, really entices people for tonight and helps heighten that experience. All right, in true LMR Live fashion, we have to play a game. So in honor, did I see a head shake over there? In true New Orleans Mardi Gras fashion, we are about to embark on the King of Beats. Let's do our video. Of beats. What's about to happen? Each contestant, Byron or John Christian, will pick two cards. One card will have the name of a song on it. The other will have the name of one of our lovely instruments. Very expensive. And then they will try to play that piece on the instrument, and guess who's going to guess the selection? All of you. So Haley will be in the house coming around to see who's a brave soul. I will be throwing beads, so pay attention so you don't get hurt. Okay, so for example, if it was the triangle, not that you need a demonstration, but I'll do this anyways. Happy birthday. What would happen would be, so you guys can practice shouting it out, right? Thank you! Fantabulous. And then comes the beads. Woo! All right. Here we go. So we're going to let our guest go first. Is that all right with you, John Christian?
That's completely great.
All right. So
I'm going
pick
first.
a pink
I'm the
card
guest.
and a purple card. But don't say it out loud. Okay? And then you pick a pink. Ooh, okay, you get the guitar. Now you're not, I don't know if you play the guitar. So you're not supposed to, you're just gonna try to get them to guess this. You have 45 seconds, audience.
No.
I like the bravery. Toss them out.
I don't know how the guitar works.
That's part of the fun. Somewhere over the rainbow. He gets a point. All right, I don't know if I can throw that far. Oh, sorry. We'll pass that off. All right, John Christian, pressure's on. You can handle it, though. I have no doubt. Fantastic. Okay. Okay. A wild card. You get to choose. I'll hold your mic for you while you go to it.
So many great options. No, I'm going to challenge myself.
All right, 45 seconds and go.
I don't know how he's going to do that.
You can't help. You got it! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh, here!
Who
pass
said
this
that?
off. I gotta try to throw farther. Farther. Fantastic! Woo! We got the winner! Woo! I did pretty good! All right. All right.
More?
You want it to be done? Come on! This is the perkiest I've seen them. It's midterms.
Very dangerous.
We're gonna give a little rejuvenation here.
Man, yeah, that's it. My hero, man.
Maybe I'm cheating a little bit.
No, that's fine. You like that one better?
No.
You can pick a different if you want. Ukulele, you're like the string man. All right.
I wish I knew how they worked.
All right, but it makes it funnier. Okay. All right, let's perk up. 45 seconds.
Jingle bells?
No, it's so good. It's so good.
What? Oh, that's really close. It's very similar. It's like the same.
Okay, you couldn't do any better than what you're doing.
Dancing Queen.
Yes! Dancing Queen! You totally got it!
Yeah, good.
Sorry, Naomi. All right, let's see what happens here. Okay. Okay, good luck. All right, good luck. You got it. I don't know. It's going to be hard on the triangle.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be hard on the
I don't know. If that shaker was any indication, it might be okay.
He can work magic. All right, 45 seconds. Anybody? You got, oh, yes. Oh, a hint. Did you just, oh my gosh. And YMCA, totally right. All right, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have to go head to head. I think we cut the time. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. You guys better be ready.
All right.
Although I might have just given it away. This is going to be good. This is going to be really good. All right. Okay, well, wait, he only gets, he gets 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Whenever you're ready.
No, it's all the same tone.
Oh my Lord, fantastic. Oh my gosh, we might be here all day. I'm gonna have to do prizes, it's gonna be a tie. All right, 10 seconds. That was, I promise he didn't know. Okay,
You are
pick another
so
one.
beautiful to me.
What'd you get? Wild card, and we won't say the, what'd you pick? Okay.
We're gonna go with the harmonica.
Okay.
That's good. That'd be easy.
All right, 10 seconds.
Backwards,
Any guesses? This one is going to be next to impossible.
I can't play it better.
All right, you did a great job, Don Christian. Tell him what it is.
I will always love you.
I will always love you. So, I appreciate your participation. You were fantastic. But the king of beats is going to go to Byron. And you get 2 awards here.
Don't ever take it off.
And you can so choose to incorporate however you see fit.
Great. Well, it is Lent after all, so
Yes, yes.
we did miss it by a week, but this
We
is very
did.
beautiful. Thank you.
You're very
Thank you
welcome. You're very
Thank
welcome.
y'all.
Thank you, John Christian. So, I want to wrap things up here. It's gone by quickly. I hope you are intrigued and enticed to join us this evening for the concert. And if you're watching, please look these wonderful people up and find out more about their music, their initiative, and their tour. Some people to thank. I want to thank our LMR supporters and partners, loyal viewers, the University of Mississippi Center for the Study of Southern Culture, Department of Music in at Ole Miss. Want to thank Brady Bramlett, Lynn Wilkins, Amanda Fleiflet, and then I want to thank the dream team who make the magic happen. They produce this show. Corinne, Haley, Alexis, Lily, and our newest team member, John Christian. Give them a hand.
Yeah, baby.
And a big announcement. Want to make sure everyone marks their calendars for Saturday, April 4th, 3 p.m. We are having our first annual Child of Mississippi concert in the Ford Center, where we will be celebrating what it means to have a relationship with this university, how that whether you come here as a student, you come here as a visitor, you come here as a friend, you become a child of this great state. It's going to be an extravaganza. So we hope to see all of you there. And remember, the music revolution continues. Good afternoon.